Hello. We're here at the NAB show in Vegas 2016 and have the great opportunity to speak with Simone Sassoli, who is the Director of Video Strategy at Cisco Systems. And thanks a lot for taking some time to speak with us. This is an incredible time. We're witnessing such transformation in this entire industry, and at this particular show we're watching as the broadcasters in real time are taking advantage of all the kinds of technologies that you guys are putting out to make this transition from SDI to IP, so they can go end-to-end IP, and now they can virtually become MVPDs themselves.
Yeah.
And of course we're seeing the beginning of these direct-to-consumer strategies all over the place, but it's just the beginning. And I guess one of the things that has come up that has made all this possible is data center technology, virtualization, and it's not just about eliminating old hardware and having the flexibility to upgrade or whatever. It's a level of flexibility we've never seen before. So I would like to ask you what your view of this is from the standpoint of the enablement of that flexibility and the kinds of things that you're bringing into the table.
So I think for the first time we are seeing that video is truly going to be just one of the applications on a data center infrastructure. No different than what our application may have been before, collaborations or others. So the important part here that we're talking at NAB is about cloud scale solutions, in the sense that it needs to be big enough and powerful enough to sustain all of the applications in the video space. Not just limited to maybe what we've seen a few years ago around transcoding, but all of the rest of the publishing element, all the transformation post and pre-production play-out systems, and even the publishing to the end devices. So all of this technology to run the same infrastructure, it's really what we're focused on.
Yeah, and that publishing to the end devices includes the live, and that's a huge difference from the past.
Live VOD, live to VOD, cloud DVR, all of the things that you would have expected just from a service providers to run on a set-top box. Now you can actually expect to run on a Roku box, on an Apple TV box, on your iPhone or an Android device. So that's the type of variety of devices and multiple type of, sometimes even codecs, right, that you may require to go to different devices.
Well, that's an interesting point, because we're seeing a lot of upheaval on the codec front right now. There's a bit of, I'd go so far as to say stall out on pursuing HEVC. It's costly, it's using a lot of CPU, it's basically a big issue as to how to implement that on the end devices. And so people are looking at alternative codecs that are coming into the market now or in the future, some royalty-free, that purport to perform at or superior to HEVC levels. So the question then becomes, how readily can somebody just implement stuff based on a specific type of device they want to reach, based on the bit rates they want to get to for that particular device or for that particular mode of transport, what maybe mobile versus fixed broadband. How flexible are things now for that?
Well, that's what makes it interesting for us, right? Yeah. Because you'll hear about SDN controllers, you'll think about NFV infrastructure. So how do we create something that can be scaled regardless of the application, and they can enable you to have different workflows depending on what you want to publish. So uncertainty is good because you can have a reusable infrastructure. So you don't have to necessarily pick, like in the old days, I was about to say, but it's not really that old. But when you had to pick a hardware codec, right, a chipset to actually implement and build the product around it, now we may have an infrastructure that can allow you to drop in different codecs. You may even have 4 or 5 different codecs for the same stream for a different delivery at the end.
So that means that you're able to, off the single stream, to have more or less the read of what the device is and what the network is that that device is served by to determine which codec gets used.
Yeah, so I wouldn't call it it wouldn't be as personalized as on a per subscriber setting, right? So I wouldn't personalize it necessarily to you. But I can now create multiple codecs for that stream for multiple devices, with multiple DRMs, with multiple configurations on bit rates or resolutions. And tomorrow we can get a new codec, right? You were talking about VC9 or VC10 or something we don't know.
Yeah.
And the same workflow, I can drop it in, but I haven't changed the way I work. I haven't changed the investment I made in the underlying infrastructure. That's really what cloud scale means, that's what virtualization means, that's what orchestration means for us.
No, of course.
And for our customers, by the way.
Yeah. There's also the different uses of codecs depending on the format of the video. You know, is it 4K? Is it SD? Is it HD? Is it 4K with HDR? So, and that's not, of course, just a codec issue. It's an issue around the processing.
Right. So you can scale the processing. So that's the whole idea, is that you can say, depending on time of day, you can allocate more compute power because you're going to be, let's say, on prime time, you're going to launch a 4K channel, right? And only for that particular time, for that particular program, you're going to allocate more processing power. And then when that prime time goes, you can just reduce it and use that particular capacity for video on demand processing or some back office processing that you wouldn't have. That's the flexibility that you get. So, and if tomorrow you have a codec and it requires more compute, we'll just scale up the compute to actually meet that demand. And the same for storage. So that's the power of the infrastructure, that it's truly elastic demand, right? Allows you to plug in different components. And the other element is that we really believe in open source and open environment, where we don't have to be the only vendor that plays in this ecosystem. As a matter of fact, you'll see around the booth that we have a lot of partners, especially in the broadcast and content provider space, EVS, Imagine, many people that bring solutions where Cisco doesn't play necessarily, but we are very strong in the infrastructure. So the application may be from somebody else, the application runs on a dynamic, scalable infrastructure, and that's where we bring the power for lowering the cost of ownership for our customers, for implementing agility of services, and for ultimately creating more opportunity to deliver content to the end consumers.
Does this apply also to the commodity servers you're using? I mean, there was a time when you guys were like, your version of a commodity server was, your applications had to run on that.
Yeah, the world changes, right? Again, we talk about the old days, but no, there is no more tie to specific hardware. Actually, there is no more tie even to a specific cloud. So things don't have to run on a Cisco cloud. We can actually burst into Amazon cloud or provide orchestration of elements that run on different clouds. And there is an initiative about intercloud, interconnecting cloud systems that would enable our customers to leverage the different investments or the different applications that they have. So yeah, there's no more tie to hardware.
Now, another interesting aspect of all this is the security requirements that vary according to the type of content, and now we're seeing, Movie Labs with its specifications for high-value content. Yeah. It isn't just UHD; it's also anything that they determine is extremely high value and needs these extra layers. And it's not just about watermarking; it's about all kinds of things, end-to-end linkage. So, is that flexibility there?
There are three elements of content protection the three elements of security that we talk about. You start the minimum is content protection. Traditionally, right? You talk about conditional access, DRM, or watermarking. But I also have to talk about service protection. How do I make sure that content is not stolen, right? And then you have business protection, right? How do I make sure I have security of the business in terms of revenue assurance and making sure that the content is not stolen or distributed to unauthorized systems. So we're working a lot on stream prevention, stream protection, being able to have business analytics to determine how content is used. So security is a very, very big element. Security is one of that ties the traditional content protection portfolio that Cisco has with the larger data center security that we have. So everything's coming together in this cloud environment that really leverage the pedigree and the IP networking experience that Cisco have.
Yeah, you mentioned watermarking, and for a while, 2 years ago, figuring out how to do that on the fly for live content and identifying the end user without having to embed it in a set-top or something was a challenge. I assume that's handled as well.
It's handled. I'm not, it's still consumed compute power and take some, but it is possible. It is used mostly to protect high-value content. But we expect that as there are more outlets and there is more distribution of our IP, there's going to be a need to find out how content is used, are used as authorized, and retrieve actually illegal use of that content. So we do expect watermarking to become an interesting part of the distribution.
And there's another aspect of watermarking that's coming into play now, and that's for actually ad marking.
Yeah.
Where the wherewithal might not be in that particular content owners or distributors set up to do SCTE kinds of marking, that watermarking becomes an alternative. Are you seeing some of that?
Starting to see some. I think there's still some fringe cases. I don't think it's mainstream.
Yeah.
We're really just focusing on content protections and revenue protection more so than these other cases.
Yeah. So at this point, it's set up to where a broadcaster who implements this whole IP infrastructure for production, for post-production, and now it gets into distribution.
They can publish to consumers directly.
Exactly. And so are there some examples of that now taking place using that kind of end-to-end IP for getting out to consumers?
Oh yeah, there are plenty of examples. TV Global, it's one of our customers that actually in about 3 months were able to process over 200 million of our assets, and they had between over 4 million iOS and Android downloads. So there was a direct-to-consumer content providers that goes and enables the scale that they need by building infrastructure very, very quickly, right? Through the Sky in the UK has launched a service where they enable multiple channels to go directly from the content providers through their platforms and go directly to consumers. So you'll see quite a bit of ability to publish and to give a platform where a third party can also run and contribute to that particular platform. So it's a lot easier to get to consumers today.
When you talk about multiple channels, there's also this question of being able to spin up channels and temporarily. Are you seeing examples of that?
Perfect example, Rio Olympics coming up. So NBC Universal will, NBC in general actually, will need to come up with channels. So NBC Universal, we have an experience where they were able to reduce compute usage 25 to 70% by leveraging the overall infrastructure and orchestrating that infrastructure. Once those channels are used through the Olympics, then they can be torn down and that particular compute capacity used for something else. So that's a perfect example of why the power of the cloud, the power orchestration, and the power of virtualized infrastructure is where video is going to reside.
Will we see them be doing 4K in that environment?
I don't have direct knowledge. I would expect that they do, but I don't know directly.
But you could support it if they did.
Absolutely. We just throw more compute if it requires.
Okay. Simone, I really appreciate the time. This is pretty amazing stuff.
Thank you.